Hey, come see us on tour. We'll be in Duluth, Georgia, Jacksonville, Florida, Los Angeles, Tempe, Arizona, and Burbank, California. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for those tickets. Well, I wanted to ask you, because you, of course, did great work on the Twitter files and uncovered the unholy marriage of the intelligence community, government, the White House, NGOs to come together with social media to censor some of the leading voices in America. Not only, when they first did it, it was just going to be Alex Jones, and that's how they get you, right? Well, and that's what I warned when I was at the Young Turks. I'm like, if they can do this to him, then they can do it to anybody. And they were like, no, you got to do something. And I'm like, no, you don't. You don't actually. We have laws in place that worked well for our whole history of our country, that if someone is doing something illegal, there's already attorney generals and sheriffs, and there's already a system set up for law enforcement if someone's doing something illegal on the internet, right? I don't need Silicon Valley to connect with Stanford University to figure out how to squelch Dr. Robert Malone, the leading guy who invented the mRNA vaccine. I don't need that, right?
Right. If I remember correctly, I think you and I were the only people like in the whole left media realm who said anything like that when the Alex Jones thing happened.
Yes.
It was like a desert. Very strange.
Well, and then so it started with Alex Jones, and then it went to the leading scientists, the leading virologists, the leading vaccine doctors, and then it went to the ex-president of the United States, right? So they were able to do it to anybody. And so here was Kamala Harris. She was actually asked about this. This was when she was running for president. And this is what she said about them censoring the president of the United States, Donald Trump.
He has lost his privileges, and it should be taken down. And the bottom line is that you can't say that you have one rule for Facebook and you have a different rule for Twitter. The same rule has to apply, which is that there has to be a responsibility that is placed on these social media sites to understand their power. They are directly speaking to millions and millions of people without any level of oversight or regulation, and that has to stop.
So how do you say that, tell me you've never fully read the Constitution without actually saying it. What she's doing is framing something that is at its core anti-constitutional, and she's framing it as normal procedure.
Right. But the problem, as you well know, is that, everybody in the press buys that.
Yes.
And, look, she I guess passed the bar late or eventually, but she did pass the bar. She was Attorney General of the state of California, which means I'm guessing you had to read the beginning of the Constitution or the Bill of Rights and the core principle in it, which is that the freedom of speech isn't about a privilege that is conferred to people. It is a natural right that the state recognizes exists. And the state's only role is to be restrained by that statute, right, or by that rule, and it's a fundamental misunderstanding that seems to be pervasive now among people in media, people in academia. Tim Walz, the other, he also said that there's no constitutional right to misinformation, which is totally incorrect.
Well, here, let me play that for you. Here he is. I'll play that. Got it right here, queued up.
I think we need to push back on this. There's no guarantee to free speech on misinformation or hate speech, and especially around our democracy.
That's, again, 100% incorrect. There's no guarantee on free speech unless it's speech that serves the masters. That's
right.
Go ahead.
Or hate speech, right? I mean, that's totally wrong too. And people may feel a certain way about that, but that's the American system. It's always been. And we're different from the rest of the world in that way. That's something we've always been kind of proud of, is that we have this very, very unique, supercharged protection for freedom of speech. And how these prominent politicians could not know that is like kind of mind-boggling, isn't it?
Yes, I think they know it, but they don't care. And right. I think most Americans don't know it, but I think those people have to know it because they have legal advisors, and I'm sure their legal advisors know it, but they know that it's also the way the wind is blowing is that the people who vote Democrat want to be able to censor people, right? And what people don't realize is that the Constitution doesn't give you the right to free speech. What the Constitution does is it just puts down on paper that you have that right. It documents that you inherently have that right. And it's not a privilege. That's how these two people are speaking about it, that freedom of speech is a privilege that the government grants you and that the government can take away. It's not. It's a right. It's not even granted to you by the Constitution. It's just documented in the Constitution that you have it. Would you agree with that statement?
Absolutely, yeah. I think that's exactly the way the First Amendment is written. And the mistake that they make is exactly the same mistake that Ketanji Brown Jackson made in the Supreme Court hearing for Murthy v. Missouri, where she complained that the lawsuit or the complaint was viewed the First Amendment in a way that was so that the First Amendment was hamstringing the government, not understanding that the First Amendment is explicitly designed to hamstring the government. That's what it's for. It's to keep the government out of the truth deciding business. And you're right. The First Amendment, all it does is it recognizes something that is inherently true, that we're, born free people with our own thoughts, and it formalizes the idea that the government's role is to stay out of the speech business and to recognize our natural rights.
But who could be, look at him, I mean, who could be angry at the middle-aged pop and fresh character? But
Coach.
I mean, he's the Shillsbury Doughboy. That's what I like to call him. But anyway, but here you are, and this is what's wrong with. It's weird. I just want to get your opinion on why do you think it's the But here's when you were testifying about the Twitter files. Watch this. This is bizarre.
In an information age, where malign actors do want to use social media to influence our elections, both big, the ones that you spent a lot of time talking about, and small, like mine.
Mr. Congressman,
and it should be a bipartisan goal. No, you don't get to ask questions here.
Okay.
It should be a bipartisan goal to ensure that Americans and only Americans determine the outcome of our elections, not fear-mongering. And I hope that you can actually take this with you, because I honestly hope that you will grapple with this. That it may be possible that if we can take off the tinfoil hat, that there's not a vast conspiracy, but that ordinary folks and national security agencies responsible for our security are trying their best to find a way to make sure that our online discourse doesn't get people hurt or see our democracy undermined. And that the very rights that you think they're trying to undermine, they may be trying to protect.
So that's what every dictator says. Every authoritarian dictator who limits free speech of their citizens say they're doing it, so I'm protecting you, and we're protecting you from outside agitators. That's exactly what he said. He sounds just like he could be Stalin, he could be Kim Jong-un, he could be Idi Amin, he could be anybody. That's what that sounds like to me. Is that what that sounds like to you?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, again, I'm old enough to have gone to college in the Soviet Union, and I was taught the Soviet Constitution, and there are sections in there about wreckers, which is what the term of art back in the day was. The government was there to protect you from enemies of the Soviet Union. Foreign adversaries who are out to undermine the power of the state. And what he's saying there is so crazy. It's contradictory in itself. He's saying, I have a tinfoil hat for coming to Congress and testifying about the FBI being involved in the speech landscape, and then simultaneously telling me that I should appreciate it.
Yes.
Which is so weird. I mean, if you could... I don't know if you see it in the tape, but there was a moment where I was actually confused. I didn't know how to respond to that because it was so strange.
Yeah, he says, take your tinfoil hat on. There's not some conspiracy, in fact, except that there is, and they're doing it for your good.
Right, exactly.
That was crazy to see. Why do you think it's the Democratic Party who has become the party of the? When I was a kid, there was always the right wing that was the people who were trying to clamp down on speech and lyrics and songs and movies and everything like that, and not let you allowed to see a Playboy magazine. It was always the right wing. Now it's the left wing. It's like the parties have flipped on this. Has it?
It's so weird, isn't it? Right? I mean, we grew up with the People versus Larry Flint and Mapplethorpe and, the Parents Music Resource Center, which, although that was Tipper Gore, that was a Democrat, still, speech was like it was the primary, it was a litmus test issue for sort of young progressive people once upon a time. Everybody was for free speech. And even through the Bush years, in Congress, there was always, a caucus of people within the Democratic Party who were just the most ardent speech advocates, whether it was Paul Wellstone or Dennis Kucinich. There was always somebody like that who was looking out for excesses and maybe the Patriot Act or, any of these new laws that popped up after 9/11 that turned out to be, unfortunately, kind of pale previews of what was to come. But yes, the Democrats were always the people who were on the front lines of protecting free speech. And now, all of a sudden, at the drop of a hat, it's changed. And I'm curious to hear what your theory is on this. I think it's because of a couple of things, but mainly it's the change in the economics of the Democratic Party. I mean, it's become a party of wealthy people. If you look at who represents, Democratic districts and what the income profile of those districts are, it's gone kind of reverse from the early Clinton days, where you used to have a lot of Republican districts that were pretty high income. That's just no longer the case anymore.
Hey, come see us on tour. We'll be in Duluth, Georgia, Jacksonville, Florida, Los Angeles, Tempe, Arizona, and Burbank, California. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for those tickets.